welcome to another edition of the Data Standard podcast experience. And I'm very excited today to have Jim Mcpherson with us. Jim is a VP of data at enterprise data at InComm. And Jim, welcome to the show. Really, really excited to have you.
Great. It's great to be here. Happy to talk with you today.
So, Jim, I think it would be helpful in your role kind of as VP of Enterprise Data, InComm Payments, maybe just give us a little bit of background on kind of what InComm Payments does and kind of your function there right now.
Sure. InComm Payments is kind of a quiet behemoth in the fintech space. We have been around since the 90s, where we started as a company focused on long distance calling, which kind of naturally evolved into some prepaid mobile work. And, we have innovated and developed numerous patents over the course of these last 30 years, most of them centered around prepaid technologies, right? So, whereas InComm has recently evolved its name to InComm Payments because we are shifting the focus of what we do to more of a payments mindset, we have historically been, very heavily focused on prepaid technology. And when I say prepaid technology, for those who are not familiar with it, I'm referring to. Let's use a practical example, right? So, you have a niece, and she loves clothes, but you don't want to risk trying to buy her some. And so you say, hey, I'm just going to get you a $50 gift card to Banana Republic. I'm going to stop at my local pharmacy, and I'm just going to get that. And you can spend that on whatever clothes you like, honey. And you go and you do that. Well, you may think as a consumer that you're buying, that card from CVS, or you're buying that card from Banana Republic. And it's true, both parties are involved in the transaction, but the company that's making that happen is InComm. And with exception of a few notable outlets here in the United States, really, if you're buying a gift card, you're probably buying it from InComm without knowing it. Our name isn't plastered everywhere, but we are the company that's facilitating the transactions, the merchandising, and logistics associated with the distribution and presentation of those products in store. We're also facilitating the actual transference of money between the parties involved. And we have, thousands of employees spread across, every continent, very large presence, obviously in the United States, but, in South APAC area, if you will, the Asia Pacific region. We're very big over there. Pretty much anywhere where, adoption of prepaid gifts, culturally has taken off, or where, digital currency for gaming, etc., is big. You'll find us having a very strong presence in retailers. So that's just a snippet of what we do. It's how we made a name for ourselves. We actually are the folks that pitched the iTunes card to Apple, nearly 20 years ago, and saying, you really should, hey, what about this? This is an idea. Maybe people would want to, give the gift of music and digital content. And it's like, okay, well, we'll try it out, right? And so billions of dollars a year later, it's one of our most successful products. And it's been a great success story, a hyper-growth company for many years. We've continued to reinvent ourselves, and we've, expanded our footprint, going from domestic to international, and then we've started to expand the lines of business that we operate as well. And so we kind of shifted from, like I said, long distance into prepaid mobile, into digital content, prepaid space. Then we started to get into good as cash products with Visa, MasterCard, American Express, preloaded good as cash cards. And then we started moving into what we call, registered reloadable debit products, kind of like checking accounts on a card. And from there, we've just taken off into a number of new spaces very recently as well, centered around alternative payments using, barcodes to pay, loading digital wallets and such in store, letting customers use cash to pay bills at retail points of sale, you name it. Pretty much if there's something that can be invented, we either did it or we're working on it.
So it sounds to me like even though maybe many of the listeners haven't heard of InComm, most of them probably somehow interacted with you in some way over the last 25, 30 years.
Yeah, we're probably one of the biggest companies you've never heard of, right?
Okay, that's fantastic. That's interesting. Okay, so I think that's super helpful to frame up kind of InComm. How about your role and kind of where your responsibilities lie?
So I'm the VP of Enterprise Data at InComm, and I'm responsible for the enterprise data strategy. That encompasses aspects of data engineering, data infrastructure, data quality and management, all kind of operational matters associated with data in terms of dealing with our thousands of customers, reporting, both sexy interactive reporting and boring reconciliation reporting. When you do tens of billions of dollars of transactions a year, there's a lot of reconciliation to be done to ensure people get paid the right amounts. And then, everything that comes with that from a support standpoint in terms of, portfolio management, DevOps and such. But really, we do have some decentralized components of data at the company. But for the most part, the bulk of our data and enterprise data strategy is consolidated here at global headquarters in Atlanta under my direction.
Okay, fantastic. So the topic in front of us today, what we want to talk about is kind of the siren song of user empowerment. So we want to get your take on recent data technology advancements and common pitfalls of technology adoption. And I mean, this is a super relevant topic, especially as kind of we look across the landscape at just valuations on data companies and the number of data startups. So I'm very curious to kind of get your take on all of this. Why don't we just start by talking about kind of the technology landscape and kind of, what you're seeing?
Sure. It's, rapidly evolving is the phrase I'll use. There are a lot of great tools coming out into the marketplace, and at such a pace, sometimes it can be difficult even for an executive to keep track of, what's the newest and hottest product that does X, Y, and Z. And you're right. I think the market, macroeconomically speaking, from private equity and VC investment and an abundance of liquidity standpoint, are fueling a lot of rapid tech development, particularly in the data space. And I think that some of the cloud revolution we've seen play out over, I guess it's been a decade or so, is also making it that much easier for these types of companies to be agile and quick growing, these tool developers, as I'll call them. And it's a confusing space, because what you end up finding is that a lot of the capabilities of these companies, overlap with one another, or they tend to focus on a specific area. They have a niche capability, or they're competing on a very specific basis. And very few folks have put together compelling, comprehensive suites of products. Although the space is maturing, and I'd argue that's changing somewhat. And there are some folks coming to the table, notably I'd say Microsoft, with more comprehensive offerings in the data technology space. But it's it's very easy, I think, for these companies to prey upon, which sounds dastardly, but to really kind of really poke the sore point of every single business, which is every business is struggling with similar problems, which is they want greater speed to insight. They want to reduce complexity associated with decision making and with the collection of data required to get to that point where you can make a decision. Everyone wants that same thing, right? And the vast majority of companies are not where they want to be in terms of having the capabilities. And every single one of these, data tech, tool providers knows that. And it becomes, it's just kind of this, feels like I've heard the same sales pitch from 30 different companies, because they know what sells, and they know that is a sore point for a lot of people. And so they're all out there pitching that, this product, whatever it might be, it, will reduce the amount of reliance you have on those IT resources that are, never available or take forever to do something, right? Kind of that same pitch. And it's an enticing pitch, particularly for folks who may not have a technological background, or may have never seen a product, like it before. And what's happening is a lot of companies are, without even knowing it, out of position to handle this evolution in data tech tooling. Right. So they're out there and they're going, oh yeah, it would be great if a user could just kind of do X, Y, and Z by themselves. That would be great, because if they could do that, then we don't have to have as many data engineering resources, or we don't have to have as many people creating reports. It could really cut down our time to insight. And so there's very admirable aims here of the company when it looks at some of these tools, but many companies have, whether they know it or not, some things working against them when it comes to making good technology adoption decisions, right? And those things that they either knowingly or unknowingly have working against them are things like, how decentralized are your data functions at the company? It is very common, as is the case with InComm, to be a company that has grown by way of acquisition, right? And as such, you may have inherited some subsidiary data functions. And so you may have these kind of disparate or siloed, pockets of data function within your company. And if that's how you operate, it can be a highly effective way of operating. I'm not looking down on it, but it can also open you up to disconnected decisions when it comes to tooling, right?
Yep.
And another thing that might make you susceptible to it is your own company's, predicament. Is it in a state of rapid growth? Is it in a state where it's being eaten alive by new entrants to the market and needs to rapidly build a capability like digital marketing? So is it kind of desperate? Either desperate to keep up with its own growth, or desperate to, fight off combatants in the marketplace. So that kind of desperation within a business for either of those reasons can drive, again, maybe some premature tool adoption as well. And it's interesting. Every company faces it. I could have came and talked today about something very specific to the fintech space. But in talking with a lot of my peers, at this level, at other companies, I realized it's a pretty universal problem. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this problem, which is tech is evolving. It can be extremely useful to your organization, but if you make the wrong decisions, which you may do knowingly or unknowingly due to circumstances similar to those I've mentioned, you can find yourself in a pretty bad state. Now, I'll talk in a second about what that bad state is, because it often starts as a lovely story, but then kind of metastasizes into an unmanageable, ungovernable, untenable situation. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So, when I say it can get out of control, let me explain. Let's start first with the goal of a particular tech vendor, right? Which is to get its foot in the door, or as so many of them refer to the strategy as, it's a land and expand strategy, right? So it's like,
sure.
Get a few people on the hook for this really cool tool. I can kind of get them, dependent upon it. And there's probably nobody better than Microsoft at doing that, because especially with what they've recently done with their Power Suite, for anyone familiar with that, be it Power BI or Power Automate or any of the other Power solutions they're coming up with, it is kind of a give away a little to get people hooked and kind of encourage adoption. They're very smart about land and expand and giving a little bit away to know that you're going to get a lot more in the back end. But the consequence of that is if that you have kind of haphazard adoption of this tech, then you don't enter into it with a long-term strategy. And so you may, for example, not have thought out, how distribution of content could, rather than being empowering and a good thing for the company, end up being a risk or a detriment, right? And so when this is being sold to you, it's being sold to you only with the niceties. It's not really talking about the potential risks that become very real, especially as the scale of use of a particular technology increases. And so, whereas, it might be great for me as a report developer to make something snazzy and distribute it to one of my executives very quickly, and it looks pretty, and I did it quickly, and I did it without the need to involve IT, let's say, that may be great. I might get a huge pat on the back for that from my VP, but then he wants something else, and then he wants something else, and then he wants something else, and he wants all 12 of the things that you've created to continue living and breathing. And so the operational burden of what I've created now as a report developer is starting to haunt me and follow me around. And then furthermore, if we're not careful, that content can start getting distributed. If I don't have the right, settings, configured from a tenant's standpoint, to speak in Power BI language, but it's equivalent anywhere else, I could inadvertently create a kind of a daisy chain of sharing to where this particular piece of content is now in the hands of someone who really shouldn't be able to see it, or even worse, is being externally distributed or presented via the web somehow in a way that wasn't anticipated, or potentially even dangerous. And so you have to think about, how content gets distributed, and you also have to think about how content gets sourced as well, because it is very easy using some of the newer tech that's out there that empowers these users to have what I would call divergent sources of truth. And that is equally dangerous to an organization, because it creates incredulity, I guess you could say, within your organization. Can I trust this? I don't know. It's supposed to be the same metric as this other report, that this other person made, but they don't tie. And the amount of time your business will start to waste on comparing apples and oranges, or apples and rotten apples, as I call them, if you're truly a bad source, it becomes very costly. And it can also diminish the confidence that someone has in a business decision that they're making. And without a centralized, form of governance in terms of, how these tools are going to be used, how the data is going to be sourced, how it's going to be presented, without having at least some centralized oversight, you run that risk of having too much empowerment that inadvertently creates these types of problems, right? And like I said, it's very easy to start with great intentions and small wins, and then for it to very quickly get out of hand to where you are kind of left with an ungovernable landscape that requires a tremendous amount of work to untangle, and can't simply be shut off because the business has in a lot of ways become kind of addicted to it or needs it to function. And so, perhaps to no one's surprise, I'm speaking of this from a point of personal experience. We've seen these same types of things pop up. And so, I'll say, in addition to those types of issues where you can put your business decision making at risk or inadvertently expose, content to audiences that really should not see it, you also run into some other things where willy-nilly or disparate tool adoption strategies you can fail to take advantage of savings in terms of licensing economies of scale. We've had situations where we've had the exact same piece of technology being used here and here, and they didn't know about it, and we weren't getting the benefit of, in fact, having that collective bit of licensing and bargaining power with that vendor. And so, really, what I'm getting at is that centralized oversight sometimes gets a nasty connotation because hurdles and bureaucracy, red tape, slowing things down. It's very common that centralized oversight be spoken of in negative terms, right? You want to break barriers and move quickly. That's true, and that's a lot of what is being sold with some of these newer data technologies centered around user empowerment. But some amount of that centralized oversight or governance is prudent to ensure that you avoid these types of pitfalls with this new data tech that's coming out.
One question I would have for you on that, Jim, is how do you balance that with kind of the opportunities for innovation that can be driven almost from the bottom of the organization up? So in other words, you have users on your DevOps team, for example, and it's so easy today. There's access to so many incredible technologies, and they're product driven, right? So like you talked about, they find something that's innovative, that's cool. How do you make sure that you don't stifle, or that you learn about and keep pace with kind of what's happening in the market? Because I think that's a challenge, right?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, if you want to quickly put yourself out of a job, you as a data professional, you can set yourself up as a roadblock to innovation and a roadblock to the business. It's a surefire way to kind of just make yourself irrelevant, and that's not what you want. So the opposite of that is to be highly collaborative, right, with the business. Support their innovation. Encourage them not to hide a new tool or a new technology because they're afraid that someone might find it, take it away from them. Encourage them to share, encourage them to bring it out into the light, and ensure that they see you as a partner, someone who is going to help them take their small scale adoption of this idea or technology and make it fit for broader use, right? And that is the approach that we try to take, the culture we try to foster here, is we try to say, I know it may sound like, or you may be afraid of, some big brother type coming in and saying, you can't do this anymore, or you can't have this technology. We don't want that. We don't. But at the same time, it is important that we have some centralized awareness of what's going on, because, you might be using this tool and it might be great, but at the same time, did you know that this person over here is using this other tool and it does all the same things, and we already have the licensing for it. And over here, you've got an uphill battle. You're going to have to go get budgeting and funding. Wouldn't you rather use this tool? It's effectively the same thing, and we already have it, and it's free, right? And so we try to help people understand that, we are that central point that will give them the visibility into whether the product they're using is, is what's best for the enterprise. And that's it's really just about collaboration and positioning, and kind of marketing the data organization as one that's here to help, and not one that's here to ram a tool down your throat or prevent you from adopting something cool. Because let's be honest, the people that are coming up with these ideas are closest to the problems, right? And this, necessity is the mother of invention. They're coming up with these solutions. They're adopting these tools because there's a business problem that requires it, right? And you, as a data person, want to hear about that problem. These people are your eyes and ears. You are a data professional. Your job is to be aware of those problems so that you can help people solve them. And if they stop telling you those problems because they're afraid that you're going to get in their way, what do you have, right? So that's in short, that's how you do it at a high level, I think, is you just really try to encourage collaboration to create that centralized oversight organically.
Yep. I love that. So I think this is super interesting, and I think this kind of hits the spot where a lot of organizations are struggling today. Can you give us a sense, Jim, as you look out over the next kind of 3 to 5 years? How is data? Because we have a lot of data scientists in this community. How do you see kind of this? There's obviously a lot of hype around AI and machine learning today, and what it will do for organizations. How do you see this evolving over the next kind of 3 to 5 years, and what kind of impact will that have on an organization and how it deals with some of the problems we've already kind of highlighted here?
Oh, man, great question. And the answer to it will be multifaceted, I think. I'll say that there's definitely a lot of really positive evolution happening in the machine learning space, right? Trying to make machine learning more accessible and more user-friendly and less complex, right? Everyone is trying to crack that nut of taking something that kind of by its nature is a little complex, right?
Mm-hmm,
I mean, machine learning is not necessarily for the faint of heart. I was like, it's a heck of a lot easier actually for me to probably teach a statistician the necessary tech and make him a data scientist than the other way around.
Right.
So it is by its nature not the most straightforward of things. I think a lot of people are out there trying to figure out, well, how do I do that? How do I make machine learning and statistics-driven decision making and models that are effectively at their core statistically driven models? How do I make that something that I can staff for, because I don't have to go and hire a ton of unicorn data scientists whose skill sets are just an intersection of so many different circles that it's just really hard to find game ready data scientists. And if I could find them, I couldn't afford them anyway. It's a problem that a lot of people have. How do I kind of commoditize some of this and simplify some of this so that I can take maybe a greener asset right out of college, or maybe somebody who has a few of those skill circles in a Venn diagram, but maybe not all of them. And how can I have tool assisted machine learning and AI tech that allows me to leverage those types of resources, right? And bring machine learning and AI into a more usable place for folks who aren't the Facebooks of the world, right?
Yep.
And so I think I think so. To answer the first part of your question, I think the evolution of the technology space is headed towards that. It's all about how do I make it more approachable, and how do I make it so that how do I potentially empower users who aren't classically trained in mathematics or computer science? How do I make this something that's more accessible to them? So I think we're going to see more of that. We're going to see more and more. There's a product out there. I'm not pitching. I'm just saying I was particularly impressed by it, and I feel it's a good example of someone or a company who gets this and is making it what they're pursuing. It's called unsupervised AI, and they really are trying to almost take the data scientists out of data science. It's a bold goal, but it's very interesting. And I think we're going to see more people who are trying to do that. In some recent conversations with the Watson team over at IBM, it looks like they too are trying to, create much more accessible forms of machine learning, and they're kind of weaving that into some of their cloud offerings. And so I think we're going to just see more and more of that. You even have basic chatbot tech, which is about the most commoditized AI function in the world at this point. You're starting to see being made really simplistic through Microsoft's Power Agent solutions, and then how easy it is to work with things like Microsoft's cognitive services right now, in terms of the power you can get out of that, and it's just offered to you as a service. I mean, it's kind of remarkable, and I think we're just going to continue to see that. And so I don't want to making it a data scientist's worry. Your jobs are secure. Your skills will be needed no matter what. It's just, I think the tools that you'll have to work with are going to be so much nicer to work with than you're going to look back one day and be like, oh my God, I can't believe how much time I spent, with R and working in Jupyter. And I think you're going to, at one point, look back and kind of think that. And I think that things are going to kind of shift in that direction. But what's also interesting is I think there's, this is technology related, but it's more business culture related. I think a lot of businesses are not in a state culturally to trust and accept the results of machine learning analysis. I know that sounds kind of silly, but there are a lot of small to mid, or even probably some large businesses that were you to present to them, some sort of even something as simple as like an A/B test or something like that. That there would be a little bit of, well, I don't know, I don't understand why is that significant? And you're like, no, trust me, in terms of statistical significance, this is huge. And they're like, yeah, but it's numbers. And so I think that what you're going to see, is you're going to see the tooling evolve to where it's going to make the value of a data scientist less so on what they can do from a technology standpoint and more so what they can do from a data storytelling standpoint. Yep. So that you can foster that evolution of the business culture to be one that is more accepting and trusting of math and models telling it what it should do, even when the results of those models are perhaps counterintuitive, right? So it's a Moneyball situation, right? Where it's like, oh, the scout said this guy could really swing. It's like, yeah, but his on-base percentage is terrible, or you got to trust the numbers, right? So, I think the data scientist's job ahead of them is going to be, who can be the best storyteller and who can, stay in touch with the rapid evolution of ML and AI tooling that's going to become available, and be someone who can translate that into results that the business can learn to trust, right? And there are companies that just by their very nature are just already there and totally on board with putting machine learning and the results of machine learning into the core of all their decision making. And then there are companies who are just couldn't be further from it, right? And so I think as a data scientist, wherever you are, you need to be mindful of what culture am I in, and therefore what role do I need to play here, right? So I think it's gonna evolve. I think it's going to become just more and more widely used and widely accepted. And I think the appetite for folks with data science skill sets is going to remain very strong. Yep. I think it's going to be a highly marketable skill set from here into the foreseeable future. So I think the future is extremely bright.
It's interesting. I just want to tease out a couple things you talked about. We focus on collaboration inside an organization, and then you talked about storytelling and this ability to understand kind of the culture you're in. These are there's a lot of soft skills here, that become, it sounds to me like from what you're saying, almost critical, even though it's almost like the hard skills, the technical skills are kind of table stakes. You have to bring those to the game. But a lot of times the organizational pieces are probably harder, and to change a mindset or a mentality inside an organization, that's probably the bigger leap. And I was even thinking when you were talking about that, autonomous vehicles. I mean, the technology is far probably ahead of the comfort level that we as a society have around accepting having autonomous vehicles.
Right.
So the actual implementation, the reality of it may be years away, but not because of the technical challenges, more because we as a society have to kind of get our heads around it. So I think that's interesting. And I think it certainly relates to kind of organizations, especially in kind of that SMB space where they don't have the resources or the the talent that maybe a Microsoft or a Facebook or a Google has at their disposal. So I appreciate that. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. We've come a long way since I started the company here about 11 years ago. We had about 5 people, and I'll never forget the first day I started, one of those 5 people quit, not because of me, but so, we effectively had, 4 folks, and today we obviously have a lot more than that, but it's been interesting to watch a lot of these evolutions happen. And if you think, I'm this will reveal how old I am, but it really, you had kind of, a relational database kind of awakening where those products were made to be more available and more accessible. And that was progressing through really the 90s. Then you kind of had into the early aughts, you started having, the kind of what I would call data warehousing awakening that was happening, right? Kind of the notion of ETL and data warehousing concepts and such really started to take more root into the early 2000s. And then you had, as you progressed from there, you started having, what about this notion of unstructured data and kind of leveraging commoditized hardware and using schema on read and all these kind of interesting, big data, I hate that word, but I'll use it, big data, concepts in terms of modern data architecture started evolving. And then cloud comes along, and the marriage of cloud and modern data architecture has just exploded what can be done with data in these last 10 years. And so, and then kind of where we're at now, to your point, is I think especially with the evolution of some RAM chip development and cloud specifically, you have things happening from an AI ML standpoint where that's going to be the next phase, right? If you go from heavy relational database into data warehousing into kind of more advanced forms of modern data architecture and unstructured data and big data concepts combined with cloud. Now it's some of the AI ML stuff is kind of that next phase of kind of where we're going. And it's really fascinating. There's what's happening in the market, and there's where your company is too. And I'll say that unless you're at one of the few hyperscale valley companies out there, it's okay, you're behind. Don't get frustrated that you're not on the bleeding edge. Take what you can get, make incremental progress, because the bleeding edge is here and you're here. And as long as you can kind of stay somewhat close and progress over time, it's really great. And that's our story here at InComm as well.
Yeah.
So we started an extraordinarily rudimentary way some 11 odd years ago, and now we have a committee focused on machine learning, robotic process automation, and AI, and we have actual data scientists, and we have things that I never would have imagined we would have had 10 years ago. So
it's amazing. Well, listen, Jim, this has been really enjoyable, and I know that the data science, the data standard community is going to really enjoy this discussion. Always like to ask, kind of at the end of these as we wrap up, if folks want to reach out, if they want to kind of network with you, what's the best way to kind of connect with you?
TikTok? No, I'm just kidding. That one's for my nieces. The best way to reach out to me would be to find me on LinkedIn.
Okay. And
just say hey that way.
Fantastic. Jim Mcpherson, VP Enterprise Data at InComm Payments, and thank you again for your time. And it's been a real privilege.
Yeah, take care, man. I really appreciate it.